Hey everybody, this is Erman Barati with your Montage. Thank you so much for being here. It is May 25th, Memorial Day in the States. So shout out to all the heroes that we've lost in the U.S. military. Today we have someone very cool, Lachlan Milne. Before we get started, I want to thank all of you again for being here. You could be anywhere in the world, virtually at least, but you're here with us today. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and read Lachlan's bio because there's a lot of gems to pull out of here. Lachlan's work has premiered at Toronto, Sundance, Berlin, Cannes, South by Southwest, Sydney, and Melbourne film festivals. He was the cinematographer for New Zealand auteur Taika Waititi's Hunt for the Wilder People, which premiered at Sundance in 2016 and remains the highest-grossing New Zealand film of all time. In 2018, he shot 4 episodes of the Netflix giant Stranger Things, which went on to become the most streamed TV show in Netflix history. Shortly after that, Lachlan worked again with Academy Award-nominated production company 21 Laps on monster problems for Paramount Studios. In 2019, he filmed Minari for Uncertain Regard, nominated director Lee Isaac Chung alongside A24 and Plan B, 2 really great companies. Later that same year, he again teamed up with Taika for Next Goal Wins, a film about the American Samoa soccer team starring Michael Fassbender and Elizabeth Moss. Minari won both the Grand Jury Prize and Audience Award at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival. Lachlan is currently the show-running cinematographer for season 4 of Stranger Things, which we just mentioned. Not continuing right now, but it'll be picked up again once the quarantine is over. So Lachlan, thank you so much for being here. How have you been keeping busy nowadays?
A lot of sitting around, a lot of talking to people. I've been reading a lot. I've been watching a lot of films, catching up and stuff I haven't had a chance to do for a while. You know what? It's funny. I've spoken to a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues as well. It's like, touch with this situation never repeats itself. But what it's done, for me at least anyway, is forced everybody just to press pause and reevaluate things. So there's one side of things where you can look at it and think about the work that you're not doing, the people you're not seeing. But essentially, it's for me, I've kind of found it as a really valuable way to kind of refocus and really kind of stop and take check of where I'm at, what I'm doing, what I'm interested in, what's important to me on a personal level, all that sort of stuff. So after the kind of like the panic and the fear of like, what does this mean? How long is this going to go for? Once I actually kind of let the reins slip through my fingers and just relaxed into, well, this is how we were all living for this period in history, you know, which the chances are probably, when are we going to be forced to sit at home and watch television again endlessly? So I've actually really enjoyed it, to be honest with you.
So what have you been watching? What have you been binging at the moment?
What did I watch? I watched Afterlife, the Ricky Gervais series, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was really well written and great, really fun. What else? I'm trying to catch up on it. Every time I speak to somebody and they mention, oh, you should watch such and such, I always make a list of movies. So I've been trying to work my way through that, which is easier said than done, because after years of people saying, oh, you should watch such and such, the list just goes on and on and on. So, I'm having said that, I'm kind of keen to get back to work. I don't know when that's going to be, but I'm excited about seeing friends again and just getting stuck into it, because once we come out of this, everybody's going to need stuff to watch, and nobody's really been able to make any of it. So the sooner we get into that, the sooner people have more stuff to watch.
Absolutely. Now, I know that I'm assuming a lot of people on here are Stranger Things fans, but I like to go back just a little bit. I love mailroom stories personally. Like, people start in the mailroom, going from here to there. So what was your mailroom story? How did you get in the industry? And was it always cinematography? Was your career path always cinematography?
Yep. It was, to be honest with you. I'm kind of lucky in the sense that I feel like I had clarity from a really early age on what it was that I wanted to do. I was born, it didn't hurt the fact that I was kind of born into a film industry family as well. I was born in Adelaide in South Australia, which is the capital city in the bottom middle part of the continent. And I lived there till I was about 13 or 14 or so. But my dad owned a really small little production company. He used to make telly documentaries and television commercials. And so I used to hang out with him at set, kind of trying to absorb things via osmosis. And then my mum was a flatbed Steenbeck editor. They used to shoot on 16 mil back in those days. So my mum would be downstairs in the basement with all the old Steenbeck 6-platter splicing film editing machines, and I'd play around in the bins that have all the offcuts of the film and etc., all that sort of stuff, and get extra bits of film and run it through the thing and try and have a look at what the picture was like. And that was kind of like the very embryonic days of me kind of understanding what a film set was, and perhaps giving me the idea that might be something I might like to do. But I remember clearly, it's really weird, from the age of 11, decreeing to the cosmos that what I wanted to do was be a cinematographer. And luckily, I've never changed my mind. So I've always considered myself really fortunate to be able to have an idea of what I wanted to do at an early age.
Absolutely. Now, and I know this is a very generic question, but I'd love to ask this to all creatives. What was
Mhm.
that? What was that film or television show that you watched and said, "Hey, I want to make film because of this show"?
The big one, I think, was Krzysztof Kieslowski's Three Colors Blue. Remember the Three Colors trilogy? I remember going to see that in the cinema and thinking I'd never seen the camera used as a storytelling tool in that way before, if that makes sense. Not only did it look beautiful, but there was large periods of that film without any dialogue, which to me was really interesting because all you're relying on is obviously sound design and score, but particularly pictures to be able to educate you, for want of a better word, as to what you're experiencing. So that was kind of like a real kind of watershed moment for me, I think, sitting in the cinema and watching that movie.
Now with Stranger Things, you started on season 3, and we're working on season 4 now before the quarantine. So what were the challenges of being part of the show? Because you already have the show already has identity visually, right? So from a storyteller's perspective, as a cinematographer, getting on a show that already has their own style, their own tone, what was it like to? Did you have a chance to add your own voice at all, from a stylistic point of view?
It's a good question. I'd never been in that situation before, and people have asked me that before. I was like, it's interesting going, because A, I'd never shot television before, and B, I'd never gone into something that had an established look. I'd always had, the conversations with the directors and producers and the production designers about the aesthetics of the film, the looks, and you all kind of team together and you work that out as a unit. But to kind of inherit something was something that I'd never really done before. So that was interesting for me. Short answer is yes. The long answer is there were certain expectations that particularly the Duffers had for themselves and also from an audience, which I completely understand, because there's a great legacy to that show from the visual side of things. It's something that lends very heavily on genre filmmaking of a particular period in history. So you have to stay true to that because people need to feel that the show is familiar from season to season. Within that, there are certain, particularly for me, like if you get to open up a new set and you get to shoot a new set. So the mall at night time was one of the things for me that hadn't been done in the show until I came in there. Or the fairgrounds. The fairgrounds were built from scratch, from nothing. It was like an empty field. So we, myself and the arts department worked really heavily in designing what the lighting look of that environment would be and trying to rely on practicals as much as possible. So yes, there is a legacy to the show for sure, which is really important. But within that, you do have the ability to maybe influence things in a style that you might be interested in.
And look at that. Someone in the comments said Three Colors. We had some Three Colors fans in here. So
oh, nice.
Nice.
It's an amazing trilogy. If you haven't checked it out, I haven't actually seen it for a little while, but I remember that having a huge influence on me. So it's fantastic. We've lost him, unfortunately, but it's Slawomir Idziak was his cinematographer. So it's just fantastic Eastern European aesthetic filmmaking. It's worth a look.
So Lachlan, it's great to meet you, sir. I can ask you questions all day, but we do have a lot of questions coming in the queue. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the audience question.
Yeah.
Up first, we're going to do Lars, Nikhil, then Vikrant. Lars, are you here?
I am.
Awesome, sir. Good to see you, sir.
You
hey,
too.
Lars, how you going?
Good. How about you, Lucky?
Good. Very good. Thank you.
I'm a big fan, of course, Stranger Things, like everybody else in the world, but The Hunt for the Winter People was the one that I first caught my attention. That crash scene, the car chase scene with the humor, like never seen anything
ridiculous,
like that.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Is brilliant. My question was, working with Taika Waititi again, I was just curious, like the two of you have had so much success in between these two projects. I was wondering if it was still kind of the same thing on set, like the same feel, or if it's totally different now that you're both kind of blown up to these huge worlds.
That's a very good question. And I like to think that it's the same. It's funny, it's a byproduct, I think, of coming from, he's from New Zealand and I'm from Australia by birth. It's a byproduct of the part of the world that we come from, I think, is that the people around you keep you very grounded. And having the history that we do and the familiarity and, there's an unbelievable amount of sarcasm in our collective cultures, particularly in our on-set relationship, which is incredibly funny and humiliating at the same time, but in a really endearing kind of loving way. So I like to think that it was exactly the same, except that we are a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and have a little bit more experience, which actually kind of make things a little bit easier because we've both done larger projects than perhaps we had at the time we did Hunt for the Wilder People, and to be able to take that experience and then apply what you've learned in that time to another project together in that same kind of, friendly, supportive environment, I think made the project better. And we had a great time. It was actually super fun. And we hadn't seen each other for a while, but like we keep in touch. We get, like, when I'm in town, I go to his place for dinner and we'll hang out and stuff, but we hadn't actually shot anything since Wilder People, I think. So that was a good 5 years, 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 years now or something like that. So it was great. It was kind of, when you pick up when you left off from people you haven't seen for a while, it's always nice.
Well, that's great to hear, because like the quirkiness seems to be like the almost what makes it special between for both of your productions. So it's great to hear. I was worried that, with the Marvel and Star Wars and everything else and Stranger Things, make it a little commercialized. But it's great to hear that it's still kind of got that sarcastic.
I can't wait for this film to come out. I haven't seen a cut. I spoke to Taika the other day about it, and he's really happy with it. But tonally, the film that we did, it feels like it's closer to Wilder People than something we've done for a while. So yeah, I'm really excited for it to come out. I hope that people really like it. I think it's fun. It's really fun.
Excellent.
And Fassbender's just a hands down genius as well. He's phenomenal in this role. It's a really different role for him. So I'm excited to see what people think.
All right. Well, thanks so much for answering my question.
Pleasure.
Nice
Absolute pleasure.
Lars, sir, always good to see you on here, man. Up next, Nikhil, Vikrant, Andrew B, then Albert. Nikhil, you there?
Hi. Yeah, I'm here.
Love your hair, dude.
Nikhil.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us, Lachlan. I actually went to graduate school, the same graduate school the Duffer Brothers went to. So there was all this promotion of Stranger Things all the time.
Cool.
These billboards. But my question is...
Tough act to follow, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So my question is, have you ever worked, I guess more particularly on TV shows, with less experienced directors? And if so, like, how do you balance the director's vision with making sure the outcome is still phenomenal and still in tone with what the TV show wants?
Sure. What I always say to directors at the beginning is I'll be as involved in the process as they want me to be, if that makes sense. And that, if it depends on some people you work with. Some people are quite clear on what they want, and you can make certain suggestions, but they are a little bit more descriptive, I suppose, in how they want the scene to, or the scenario to play out. The way I really like to work is I like to be as creatively involved in all the different elements, and that comes down to script, if they're happy for me to comment on, like, discreetly, quietly, in a respectful way about performance things, if I have some tonal ideas or something like that, about composition, lighting, obviously all that sort of stuff, but also in editorial and in the pacing of how you shoot things, because the coverage of projects, what you don't shoot is often as important as what you do shoot when it comes to editorial, because that's a way that you can control the pace and the tone of the project. But with younger directors, or not necessarily younger, with maybe people who don't have quite as much experience, it's really important to be patient and to listen to what they have to say, because everybody has an idea about what they want. They might not necessarily know the right words or the right terms in order to get that out. And that's where you can come in and say, did you mean something like this? Or you offer something up, or you show a picture or a film reference or something like that. And that's a lot of the time is a really quick way to cut through the middleman and show somebody a concept without necessarily having to describe it. So I think patience is really key. But you get a really good idea from people in the first place if they have a clear idea of what it is that they want, and they just might lack the experience to verbalize that. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for answering my question. That was very.
Does that make sense? I ramble a little bit.
Yeah. I totally got it. Like I think that sort of the way you sort of work is very familiar to sort of, I guess, how we work in a lot of times in grad schools with the DPs, even though it's not a TV show, like, I guess a lot of those lessons still apply and everything. Yeah.
The only TV show I've ever done is Stranger Things. Apart from that, all I've done is movies and ads and docos and music videos and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So which is weird, my only knowledge of television is an enormous television show.
Well, it's a pretty good show to have knowledge of.
It's fun. Well, thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. Good to meet you. Up next, we have Vikrant, Andrew B, Albert, Don, Kevin A. Vikrant, you're up.
Hi, Lachlan. Thank you so much for doing this. So kind of going off of the answer that you gave to Nikhil's question, I wanted to ask, when you worked on Stranger Things, how close of a relationship did you have with the film editors, and I guess one follow-up question is, how did that relationship differ from the relationships you had with the film editors on feature films?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. It's probably the only exception to the rule that I just said is probably Stranger Things, because the nature, the pace at which we have to shoot, the amount of coverage that is required, particularly when you're doing something that's like heavily action involved, where you're not necessarily sustaining your shots and holding things for a long time. It's more like 2 or 3 second grabs of things. You end up having to do more coverage to cut around certain thing. Maybe there's an art department person has to run in and light a wick of a thing and then run out of frame, and then you just use the bit just before they throw it, something like that.
Right.
So as far as editorial goes for Stranger Things, the Duffers were very much autonomous with that. I mean, we would talk, obviously, when we were shooting, about the coverage, about the tone of the scene that we wanted it to, was it a handheld thing? Was it we were going to labor our shots a little bit more? Then obviously with a show like that, you've got to factor in a lot of logistical things about working with minors, which is the time limitations you have working with kids of a certain age, just because they have to have schooling, they can't work after certain hours, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of the time, that's kind of the tail that wags the dog a little bit with how you shoot things sometimes. And so the real trick is trying to get past that and really focus down on what the essence of the scene is and the best way to creatively execute that. So Stranger Things, I didn't really talk about editorial too much, but when it's a drama project and you're getting editorial notes or offlines whilst you're shooting, which often editorial starts a week or 2 weeks into production on a feature film. And so while you're shooting, you get, if the directors are happy to show you, they'll say, show you the scene from 4 days ago that you shot. It's just in a rough assembly kind of way. And that often can really influence how you might move forward shooting things. You might find that you had too much coverage and you didn't need that close up of that person. So because tonally it wasn't right. So when that situation comes up again, you go, well, I'm not going to do that because A, it's not going to get used. B, we could spend our time more efficiently doing something else or preparing something. You know what I mean? So a lot of the times that seems to happen, for me at least anyway. So I like to think that sometimes you adapt, because there's 3 films you make, right? There's the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one that you cut. Right. And I always find it really interesting during the process to get those notes. And sometimes you find that change tact, or sometimes it's just like, it's clear that that's what you set out to do, and it's proven to be the right decision. So.
Yeah, gotcha. So you're saying that the Duffer Brothers give you editorial notes throughout the show. Did Taika Waititi also give you notes? Editorial
Sometimes
notes?
we see some stuff. Yeah, Taika's really clear about how he wants to cut stuff. He really is, which is great. And so you don't tend to shoot stuff you don't need. So the coverage can be a lot more disciplined, I think, for want of a better word, with Taika, which is great. So we always talk about the scenes, we'll block it through, and then he'll know where the beats are and the bits that we'll need to spend a little bit more time on, and then the beats that perhaps aren't quite so interesting or required. Maybe you do one, maybe 2 takes of a wide shot, and maybe you don't run it the whole way through because you're only going to use it at the beginning. That kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Cool. Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Vikert. Actually, fun fact, Vikert won my music contest earlier this year. So if anyone needs a really good composer, hit him up. So hit up Vikert.
Oh, right on.
Up next, we have Andrew Belcher, followed by Albert, then Don, then Kevin.
Cool. Hi, guys.
Hey, man.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Just kind of trying to stay sane, but I think we all are. So
yeah.
Hopefully we're not alone. I'd like to ask a question. Actually, I think it's going back to the previous question that we just had. In order to try to be more efficient as a unit in itself, do you have any recommendations for screenwriters who might be unfamiliar with the craft of cinematography? If there's any resources that we could possibly try to look into, because the worst thing that I believe a first time makes is kind of like underestimating how much time it truly takes to get like the perfect lighting, to get the perfect shot, everything like that. So are there any resources that we could probably try to look into rather, to see if they can help us out?
That is a genuinely excellent question. And I found myself on the receiving end of writers writing something that is a great idea that is incredibly difficult to execute, or it's a great idea for a film that doesn't have the time or the resources to execute that to the best of its availability, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's a really good That's a really good question. I guess it's a hard question with regard to a specific instance. Well, I guess what I would say globally is that be aware of the budget of the project that you're writing. I know that's, you know, if you're writing a Marvel movie and you know you've got $130 million or whatever it is, then you might have 4 days to shoot that one half-page action sequence, you know. But if you take a half-page action sequence that might have 10 or 12 key beats that involves an explosion or somebody falling off a bridge or whatever, something that takes time on the day to do and takes resources, and you apply that to like a 25-day schedule where you've got 95 minutes or 100 minutes of heavy dialogue, and then you've got a little blip in the radar, which is proportionately you need to allow more time to a tiny amount of screen time within the scale of the whole picture. I guess in a roundabout way, that's probably the best way I've got of answering that is if you're write a film for I guess for how much you think you're going to make it for, because that has, I mean, time and money is the two biggest enemies of any film crew, isn't it? And there's a version of everything. It's just that if you write and then 500 people fall into the sea or whatever it is or something like that, and you know you've got one afternoon, you have to do it in whatever the conditions are, you know, it's full sun and you need it to be a stormy day and there's no time to reshoot it and you have to do it, then you go, well, we'll rely on post. It's like, well, we don't actually have that much money on post. All you do is end up doing 5 people that you kind of do like a crowd dupe thing, or you shoot it tight to allude to the fact, and you use sound design that there's 494 other people running around. But then you can't do a sky replacement because, you know, the sun's out and you need it to be gloomy, and you can't overhead it because you don't have enough time, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I guess know your limitations in a roundabout way, but that's a really good question. Because, you know, nobody wants anybody to be disappointed as well. Like, you don't want to write something cool and then go, oh, shit, it just didn't really translate because of whatever reason, or the guy's got it wrong or whatever it might be. But it's because their hands were tied, budgetary or time or whatever. It's a really good question.
And that's why I asked, because it's very, especially for smaller productions that don't have as much money, it's really difficult to kind of try to wait around there. But that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, because that'll give me a lot to work with. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Another fun fact, guys. My directorial debut is actually with Andrew, something that he wrote. So we're gonna be pulling that off in the future after COVID. So up next we have Albert, Don, Kevin, Tiffany, Joy. Albert, you there?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going, guys? Good afternoon. Right here in LA, just doing my thing here. And my question to you about cinematography, what is your personal favorite camera to use when it comes to cinematography and software?
The camera I'm probably most familiar with that I do a lot of work with is the Arri Alexa. It's the one that I find the most comfort in. I think I've used it in most scenarios now, and I've invariably managed to get really, really nice results from it. I think that's probably it's absolutely my favorite. As far as software goes, how do you mean? Do you mean like editorial software, or do you mean color grading, or
both? Yeah, color grading and editorial.
Editorial, I don't do too much of it. I used to muck around a little bit on Final Cut, but they don't make it anymore. So, and I haven't learned anything else. But I use Resolve a lot. I make a lot of my own 3D lookup tables for projects that I do. And I use it for working on dailies. You know, I'll take logs or raws or something like that and put it in Resolve and do a tentative gray to send through for coloring in the evening. So probably Resolve is probably the front runner, I think.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
No worries, man.
Thank you, Albert. Good to have you on here, sir. Up next, we have Don, then Kevin, then Tiffany, Joy. Hey, Don, are you there?
Hi.
Oh, here you go.
Yes, I am. Hi, Lachie. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm good. I've been moving, so I'm finally settled and have whiskey.
Good.
So I started out doing makeup and effects, and now I write, and I just finished 2 shows that are being in the process of selling right now. One is cable, one is digital streaming. And so I write very clearly with visuals in mind, and I've been fortunate enough to work with DPs like Seamus McGarvey and people who tell stories so beautifully. So I was wondering, when you shot the 4 episodes that you did with Stranger Things, I'm very curious from more of a writer-director standpoint about lens packages that you used, because to get that grainy, beautiful 80s feel. And then there's so much contrast of vibrant color. So I was wondering if you, like, what kind of lens packages you used. Also, were there a lot of handhelds, or did you do crane, or did you do a mix of both, or tracks, whatever?
Sure. The camera, so that was all shot on the Red Monstro, the 8K Monstro we shot on last season. And we used the Leica Thalia lenses, which are the larger format lenses, which are which cover the full frame. There's a little bit of grain put in post-production, which is probably what you're talking about, because it's quite a clean image. So we kind of try and detune it a little bit, even though Netflix requires a 4K deliverable standard for any of the content that they make themselves. There's still within that, there's still the means to kind of degrade the image a little bit to try and put it back in that kind of 80s aesthetic as you're talking about. We had a very aggressive lookup table, and I mean aggressive in the sense that it went to white and black really quickly. It was quite high contrast. So we used that a lot as a base starting point for lighting. And I lit it quite contrastly and underexposed quite a bit, particularly as the story went on. I kind of went quite a bit darker with a lot of the mall stuff, just to kind of give it a bit more of a sense of dread, I suppose. We used a lot of color, because it was kind of like 1985 was like peak neon, peak Benetton, peak 80s, you know. So particularly in the mall, I wanted it to feel like the mall was doing most of the lighting, if that makes sense, like the actual practical components of the mall. At night, as far as the flickering were going, like we rewired the entire mall and put different transformers in it so we could make all the neons flicker without them burning out, so that we could have them in shot and we wouldn't have to rely on post. And then I just sunk those up with external lights of the same color to make it look like they were flickering off camera. As far as handheld and crane goes, there's quite a lot of both. Like when there's like high energy action work, we tend to do a little bit more handheld work. But particularly with the duffers, we live on a 50-foot super techno crane. Most of the mall work was done on that. And it's just, I mean, they're fantastic at moving the camera, and their ability to kind of glue sequences together, and people walking in and off, handing off from one person, walks over, you know, somebody else brings in, they pick up, then their dialogue continues, etc. So we do spend a bit of time choreographing those kinds of developing shots a lot, and we use a crane to that quite a bit.
Okay, and then if I can just add a quick follow-up, is that okay?
No, yes, of course.
So my other question was, from a story perspective, like what kind of project are you really passionate about doing? Because both of these all the projects that you've done, they're very different in terms of content and stories. And I feel like every DP has that internal writer / director that's always like, ooh, it would be so fun to play and do this project, if it's time period or if it's a topic. Is there something in particular that you would just be hungry to do?
That's a good question. There's a film I really love called Badlands, that is a Terrence Malick film, that essentially is 2 young people out on the run. Very simple filmmaking, very simple story, great performance, road movie. I would love to do something like that. I don't know, there's something about that I love the tone of that. I also love a film like No Country for Old Men, which is incredibly well written, beautifully photographed, is like as close to like a perfect film, I think, as you can get. Something like that would be fantastic. So I don't really know, which is part of the reason why I really like changing projects as much as possible, because it's too creative and too interesting a job to keep repeating yourself, and to feel like, or I think anyway, to feel like you have a signature look, or this is what I do, and if you employ me, this is what you get. I don't think like that, and I don't think that you can grow as an individual and as a creative person if you think like that. That's only me. I don't know if that's true.
No, I 100% agree as a writer.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Genre.
Yeah, great. So I like to try and look for different things, and sometimes if you move into a situation that you haven't really done before, it's a great way to A, test yourself, but also B, to learn things as well. So I'm really interested in the diversity of projects, I think.
Well, thanks for taking the time, and
Pleasure.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. So have a good rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of the questions.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Dawn. Good to see you finally for the first time. I think we've been social friends for how many years now? Up next, we have Kevin, Tiffany Joy, Andrew, then Miguel. Kevin, A, you're up. Let me Let me unmute you really quick, Kevin. How about now? Kevin,
here we go.
Here you go. Yes, sir.
Technical difficulties. I just want to say I absolutely love your work. Very beautiful. I fell in love with it from the day I saw it. Very ET-esque. I always like compare it to that because that's what it reminds me of, because I grew up in 1985. Right. And so it's just stunning stuff that you shoot. Is there a style, is there a technique or a style, is there a term that you shoot in? Is it called something? And also, is there some secrets, some things that you do that aren't technically lens-based or just lighting-based that you do use for shooting the show?
You mean for Stranger Things?
Yes.
As far as a term goes, I don't know. I mean, it's funny, you know, Sean, when we were shooting the other day, Sean Levy, who's he's the EP of the show, but he's also one of the directors, and he's a great friend, and we worked together a bit on that show. I remember I was lighting a shot and framing it up, and then he came back in and he walked in and he said, "Oh, that's classic ST." So it's like, it's close to whatever an expression is. It's like, I guess that's all I got. But it was like, so that was fun. So I don't know what it is, but it's like, there's kind of like for people that have done it a little bit, it's like a little bit of an understanding of what it should look like, but not really knowing what that term is, except classic ST. I don't know. What was the second part? Was it like something about, like, is there something beyond the lenses and the camera that we do?
Yeah, so, you know, like Sidney Lumet had a lot of secrets that he let out that he did with his style of shooting. Is there some stuff that you do that isn't necessarily lens-based or necessarily lighting-based?
Probably the big thing is smoke and atmos. We use a lot of that because particularly if you're doing night exterior scenes in the woods, if you've got, you know, dark black verticals and you put a moonlight source up, there's in between those things is essentially nothing, so there's nothing to light. But if you put a density into the atmosphere, which we use a lot, we use low-lying smoke and hope that the wind stays down. We use that a lot. That's one of the main aesthetic things, I think, of the show, that and smoke for interiors as well, just so that there's like a heaviness or like a lived-in sense to the air. And, you know, like if you're looking at practical lighting sources in the background, there might be like a little halation around the actual pinpoint of light itself. A lot of that is done from smoke atmosphere inside rooms. Yeah, we do that a lot. So as far as like a trick, that's probably one.
How much would you say is due to your creative input to then editing? Is it like 80-20? Is it 50-50? Like, how much does go into editing that changes everything that you were so passionately doing?
I mean, Sean and the Duffers have complete autonomy over editorial for Stranger Things. So I shoot it on the day, and then every now and then, like maybe one of them will come up and show me something on the day, but very rarely. Most of the time, I see it when you guys see it on July the 4th. Yeah. So I was in Oklahoma doing a film, doing Minari, and then Stranger Things came on, and I sat down in my hotel room and watched it, and that was the first time I'd seen it since we shot it. So as far as on the day goes, again, like as a cinematographer, one of the main ways you can influence editorial is by not shooting things. And it's not like saying, I refuse to shoot that because this has to be like this. You can't do that. It's just in conversations with the director. If you have if you both of you are vibing on the same tone of what you want the scene to be, if you want it to be more methodical or it plays better in the wide shot, because the performances are realistic and you don't feel like editorially you need to come in and see a close-up on somebody because it works better, they're jumping on each other's lines or something, and that messiness is what makes it great and honest and observed. And if you want to hold it like that, then you go, you know what, it's better if we don't shoot that, because if we do shoot it, there's a chance that you'll use it, and if you don't shoot it, you can't, and it'll stay like that.
Oh, wow. So then just to kind of add a second question, which I hope you don't mind, how much talk do you have to the other actors, and do you influence their performances like on the spot, like saying, hey, listen, you need to do this and this is not working, past the director? Like, do you go in front of the director and change things?
No, never. You can never do that. At the end of that, like a film, like a director, he or she there has to be one point of communication with actors, because as soon as there's too many ideas or too many points of views, people get confused, and particularly with actors, it can really throw them. So what I would do is I'll always go up and, like, well, not always, but if I feel like there's, A, I feel like I have the relationship with the director, I can do it, but B, I will always do it in a discreet way, and I don't do it across from the camera to, or the monitor to the director. I always go up and pull he or she aside and literally just whisper in the ear so that nobody else can hear it. So it's not a power thing. It's just like, hey, here's another way of doing it. Maybe something's not working. Here's an idea. Feel free for this to be shit or not. But what about if we tried this? And so it doesn't necessarily need to feel like there's an ego in any of it, if that makes sense.
Of course.
You got to be super delicate about that. And it's really easy to confuse people as well if there are too many cooks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, because I'm an actor. So like I always want to see like what the idea is behind, like, a lot of times people do talk to you, you know what I mean? And it's like, wow, it's like, I can't even get my lines now. You're like,
yeah, it can be a little confusing. And that's, I mean, because I don't operate on Stranger Things because there's too much going on, but on every other project, I'm always the A camera operator as well. All the other movies and everything, I always operate and light and do everything. So I'm always like physically the person who's closest to the actors.
Of course.
So maybe that's part of the reason why I'm a little aware of that, because you just have, you have to be careful. And they're doing their own thing, you're doing your own thing. Sometimes they'll ask an opinion about a mark or whatever. That's fine. That's totally fine.
Right.
But if it's more of a creative tonal thing, then you have to default to the director. It's the director's responsibility and their prerogative.
Wow, that's so awesome. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
No, pleasure.
Yeah.
No worries.
Good to meet you, Kevin. Lachlan. I said Lars because Lars is on the screen on my screen on top.
Lachlan.
So, Lachlan, are you still got time?
Yeah, no, fine.
Awesome, man. We still have a few more. Tiffany Joy, Andrew Miguel, and Jeremiah are on deck. Tiffany Joy up next.
Hi, Lachlan. Nice to meet you. I'm Tiffany.
Nice to meet you.
I had a quick question. First of all, I'm a fan. I love your work.
Thanks.
And I'm wanting to know, in your experience so far, what is something that you would kind of want in the future when working with directors, like in form of communication, that kind of thing, or just in general working with you on the technical side?
I really love, it's really important that both of you think that you're making the same kind of film, whatever that might be. That both of you are aligned tonally in what you want out of this project. I think that's really important. I really like going into it, like if you take an average shoot day, I really like going in there with a concept of what you want to do, i.e. you're not just turning up and winging it. So you either have a shot list. I find a shot list really handy. And in pre-production, one of the hard things in pre-production is to get one-on-one time with the director, particularly as you get later into the stage, because they're just smashed with so many other departments needing answers for things: hair, makeup, wardrobe, locations, casting, everything, and so much of the time, everything goes down to the wire with pre-production. It only just gets more and more difficult to get time. So if you can start pre-production earlier and you've got a finished script, if you can just spend, what I really like doing is just spending one-on-one time with the director, whether it be during pre-production or at his or her house on the weekend or whatever, after work, something, and just shot listing, reading through scenes together and just breaking it down, shot listing. So if you can go in with the whole film shot listed, doesn't mean that's what it's going to be like. It just means that you're going in there with an idea of how to do it. You're going in there with a plan. Because once the actors get in there, they might have a completely different idea of how they want to approach it. But if you have like an embryonic, broad brushstroke concept of how you want to visually see that scene play out, then when the actors come in and say, I actually think I'd be getting out of the car for this thing, or I think I'd walking through the door, I'd be sitting over there, or I don't think I should be this physically close to this person because at this point of the story, I'm angry with them, or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden you've got one person in one room and one person in a door frame or something. And that might completely change it. At least you've got some idea of totally what the essence of that scene is. You break it down, you go, whose scene is it? Is it that actor's? Is it that actor's? Where does it come in the arc? Or I find all that stuff really interesting, is kind of plotting that out. So that tonally, you have the tools to be able to adapt when things change, which it invariably does, because that's what filmmaking is. So if you have some sort of an idea when you go in there, it's just information that you can change at a later date. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And another thing I was wondering regarding lighting, excluding lighting plots, do you ever have a day where you just take your keys and run through a setup of some of your more experimental lighting, just so on the day of you're prepared for that?
Always, yeah. You have to, I think as a cinematographer, I think it's really imperative to have at least 2 plans.
Okay.
You have plan A and then you have plan B. And that's because, to what I was saying before, is because stuff always changes. It starts raining, or the location falls through the night before. Like, it's shit happens all the time that nobody saw coming. And you can either be the kind of person that throws their hands up and goes, well, you know, I didn't plan for that. Or you can be the person that has great resources around them as far as their heads of department and uses their experience. Maybe they've been in that situation where you haven't before. And as long as you create an environment where everybody feels like they can contribute without fear of reprisal, which I think is a key role as a cinematographer, to make everybody feel from all departments that they can contribute on a creative level as well, because it makes everybody's work better. As long as they can do that, then you won't get stuck. But there's definitely some situations where maybe the director will come up to me and there's, like, I've had this many times, they've rewritten a scene the night before because the film is changing. They've rewritten it the night before, and then they'll come to me with new sides in the morning that me, the first AD, the production designer, the actors, everybody's reading it in the morning over breakfast for the first time. And then you're reacting, then you're just working out what to do. And sometimes I've been caught out, it's like, shit, this location doesn't really lend itself for that too much, but we're here and we have to shoot. So what are we going to do? And that's when you get everybody together, put everybody's heads on the same thing, and then you work it out.
Okay. So financially speaking, when someone hires you, is that something that kind of already comes expected, is that you would be setting up these lighting, not the lighting plots, but setting up the lighting ahead of time to experiment with it? Or is that like
most of the experimentation happens, but because the most expensive time on a film shoot is the day that you're shooting there. Pre-production is the cheapest. So I tend to do a lot of planning, like for instance in Stranger Things, a lot of the time, like I have my gaffer on one side and my grip on the other side, and whilst we're like, they'll give their team instructions to set up the particular shot, the camera operators moving around, etc. At that point, we'll sit down with the prelim schedule for the next day and go through it and work out what it is, and then we'll do little plans based on that, and then the rigging crews will go off and do the work whilst you're on the shoot day. They'll do the advanced work, and that's what a luxury like Stranger Things, the show of that scale, allows you, is that you have multiple departments to be able to leapfrog and get a head start on stuff, so that when you walk into that scenario, that scene, whether it be a school or a, I don't know, mall or whatever it might be, you have the lighting based on the scout that you've done with the director and the production designer at kind of like 85, 90% there, so that it limits the amount of time you spend on the day standing around scratching your head trying to work out what you want to do. Because if you can do that, production requires it because it's super expensive, but also it means that you're spending the time making it rather than setting it up. Do you know what I mean? So you're actually spending the time on a shoot day filming it, and the directors get maybe 2 or 3 more takes, or you do a couple more setups or something like that. And you get that time on the day to refine the work that you're doing rather than setting it up.
Okay. One last question. I promise, last one. Do you ever have, or is the editor ever on set to be aware of? Okay. I had heard that some productions do and some don't. So
it depends. A lot of the time in the early days, they come on where there's not too much to edit, but as the later on as it goes, you tend not to see them too much because they've literally just got too much work to do. But you do get notes from editorial every day or every other day. It's like, and the amount of times you do, you know, they might need maybe a cut jars, and they go, you know what I really need is I need an insert of a hand on a doorknob to get around a couple of cuts or something like that. And then you go, okay, well, we're going to a house on Thursday. There's a door which we never really saw in the other place. Maybe we could fit it in there, and then you work that into the schedule. Or you're on a stage and you build a door and you use a hand double. You know what I mean? So that happens a lot for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, of course.
Thank you so much, Tiffany Joy. She's one of our regulars on here. Always good to have you.
Am I talking too much?
No, you're good, man. You're so good. Up next, we have Andrea Miguel, then Jeremiah.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Another one of our regulars. What's up, Andrea?
Good, doing good. How about you?
Good. Wow, look at that
background. Awesome. I hope you're doing well too. And thanks for, just being here and sharing your knowledge with us. It's always greatly appreciated.
You're welcome.
I did have a couple questions. I kind of wanted to tweak it a little bit. So the first question was, is there something on set, I guess maybe in your earlier days or even now, that you just thought like a really cool camera trick that you learned and it kind of stuck with you, and someone taught you on set and you're just like, wow, like that's something that's really cool, like just kind of picked it up from someone else maybe, or you played around like at just being there?
Yep. There was one thing, and I haven't used it in a while, and only because you put me on the spot. When I used to do music videos, which I haven't done through a lack of desire, I just haven't managed to do one in quite a while. But when we do like a rock band, for instance, and you had to, and we're shooting on film, and you wanted it to feel a little bit violent, like maybe handheld wouldn't necessarily work because you wanted to be on a longer lens or something. It's a friend of mine who showed me that if you got a power drill, and if you put an Allen key, like a right angled Allen key in the end of the power drill, and then taped it onto the panhandle and used like a variable speed trigger, you could actually make it look like you're in an earthquake and the whole camera was shaking.
Wow.
And it was literally just a power drill taped onto the side of thankfully there was no behind the scene crews on those days, so nobody actually saw what it was like and how low rent it really was. But that was something kind of funny and cheap that we used to do. But I don't know, apart from that now, it's like every job feels like it's different. And like you end up with a box of tricks, and commercials really help as well, just because they're so different and you do them quite frequently, or used to do them quite frequently, and you get to use new lenses and try maybe new processing techniques on new cameras and that sort of stuff. And so you used to use those as a little bit of an experimental period to be able to load up your arsenal to then take onto another project. But I don't know, that's the best I've got at the moment. Sounds daggy now that I say it out loud. Maybe I should bring it back. Maybe everybody should start doing it.
I think
like speed ramping.
Yeah, I think that's great, because it's like sometimes you really think outside of the box when money is against you, and you're more resourceful 100%. And more creative. And I think on a set that I produced, we ended up using, I don't know if they found it online or if they've done it before, but it was like potato sheddings, like pre-baking, and to make it look like snow. And a leaf blower. And I was just like, oh my God, like you wouldn't know until, you're doing your research, or it comes to a scene, or someone just has had experience because they worked on low budget sets.
100%. That's a good trick, actually. Speaking of the potato, you reminded me of something that happened on Stranger Things, which is we were doing an underwater scene, and the lens kept fogging up, and we had Rain-X, which is essentially a sprayer which is designed to keep the water from kind of coagulating so that it looks like it's clear when it goes above surface. And it was running out, and I just said, I was thinking back to my music video days, and I just said to one of the camera guys, I said, go to catering and get me a whole potato, get me a full-size potato. It has to be like a Desiree potato, like a big white one, the ones that are really good for making mash. And so they went out and got one, and I cut it in half, and there's enzymes or there's a gel or something like this is a good trick inside the potato. And if you rub it on the outside of the lens and then dunk it in water and wash the residue off, it essentially works like Rain-X. And we managed to get the shot because of that.
So is it something
there's a hot tip.
Put underwater, or what is it? What does it ultimately do?
It's like when you have a hydroflex, like an underwater housing. It's sometimes when you bring it up, the water beads in a way that you don't want it to, because you want to be able it to be like a clear image. And I think maybe it's the starch. The starch in potatoes managed to help doing that. So there you go.
Oh my God, that's so cool though. I mean, like that's just what makes it so much more interesting to me. It's like you can have money buy anything, but to being creative and thinking on your feet because of, just using your resources, I think that's really awesome. So.
And that comes from doing jobs with no money, because there is no alternative. Everything gets easy when you have money, because you throw money at a problem, people, time, resources, whatever, and it goes away. But when it's just you and the sun setting and you've got water on the lens and a bunch of potatoes, there's only one thing to do.
Oh my God, I'm like literally having flashbacks of all the potatoes.
There you go. You'll never look at them again the same.
Yeah. And my other question was, I'm kind of like an amateur director producer, but I want to be the best that I can possibly be just with like directing a cinematographer. You know, I think that I've even been on sets where directors didn't know all camera angles or camera terms, which I thought that.
That's okay. But that's okay though, because everybody's got to learn. You've got to start from somewhere though.
Yeah.
You just need to not work with assholes who are going to make you feel guilty for feeling like that. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to work with people that are going to be patient rather than who's this person? They don't know what they're doing, because you might have the best idea in the world and you might not know how to, might not have the terms yet to be able to visualize that or to mention that, but you need to be around people that will help that. Like you're only as good as the people around you in all departments, I think, as well. So if there's one tip, I guess it's that.
And would you say that any, you know, successful director knows pretty much A to Z camera terms? I would think so, because you're speaking in a sort of language that way, right? To telling them what they want, or
eventually though, it's not like you come out of film school and you know everything, or you do a couple of short films and you have all the answers, because there is still, like on every project, there's stuff that you come up against that nobody, that perhaps you as an individual haven't experienced before. And so you, like everybody's learning. That's one of the great things about filmmaking. But you also, the other thing to remember is that directors, if you're a writer director, right, you might spend 4 years on or more on one project, and maybe 6 of those weeks of that 4 years is actually shooting. Beforehand, you're writing it, you're getting the money, you're casting it, you know what I mean? All that sort of stuff. So you got to think about the volume of shooting or volume of time on set that directors are maybe not having compared to people in other departments, where you get the time on set to be able to learn those terms. Do you know what I mean? Just by doing it, just by the sheer amount of work that you're doing. And DPs inherently tend to work a lot more than directors, because, you know, a director can do, a DP can do 2 ads in a week or 3 ads in a week or something like that, or bounce from show to show to show. But directors, sometimes there tends to be a lot larger gap between projects.
Yeah, that's really true. I feel like I'm always trying to pay attention to what the director says as an actress on set, just trying to listen to how people are communicating with each other and learning that way. But I feel like I'm like, should I take a class somewhere? I know that obviously everything is shut down, but like a YouTube class just to kind of, you know, get more camera knowledge. Because I also like to take, you know, pictures and photography, which led me to my last question. As a, you know, beginner, I have a lot of friends who suggested Sony. I think it's A7 III. I'm probably not even calling it correctly.
Stills camera?
Yeah, I guess for stills or for you know, cinematography, what do you recommend? Just like, hey, I want to get my feet wet. I want to make a purchase that is a couple grand, but I want to make the right purchase. But you know, just kind of.
I guess it depends on the kind of photos that you want to take as well, too. I recommend we're going with something that's not overwhelming and something that's very simple to use. And, you know, a Sony A7 is fantastic, but also people shoot stills that go on billboards for that, you know, because the resolution is so high. And, you know, you ask yourself, do you need to shoot billboards, or are you going to mostly shoot stuff that's going to stay on your laptop, or maybe you print some stuff? Like there's a bunch of photos that I've done for an old Fuji X100S that was like shot on large JPEG, and I still printed it up to 36 by 24 inches and it looks great. Do you know what I mean? So it's seductive to have, like, you know, the theory that, you know, you need more resolution, more everything, but I would argue that you want a camera that will be a little bit more ergonomic and make a little bit more sense to you, because as long as it's easier to use, I think that you give yourself the best chance of taking a good photo and not getting bamboozled by technology. I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm just saying that's something to consider.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like something that I want to, like, you know, do self tapes, make little shorts at home or with friends. But obviously I pay someone when I'm, you know, doing the big thing, hiring someone, just like something to use so I can do it myself when I'm like, hey, I have an idea, I want to film something, you know, just like at home use, I guess you could say. But yes, thank you so very much. This was great, and appreciate your time. So yeah, that concludes my last question.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. Always good to have you on these chats. Up next, we have Miguel, Jeremiah, then Jason, then back to Lars if no one else has a question. So Miguel, Jeremiah, Jason, then back to Lars.
Hello. So I just had, I was just wondering, so what is your advice for a barely starting videographer or a cinematographer? Like, what should they expect in the field of cinematography or any field of film?
Do you mean like as far as like getting experience or where to start with the first job? Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah.
I guess all I can lean on is what I did. And I was a camera assistant for about 5 or 6 years. I worked up through the ranks. I was a loader. It was film days as well. So I was a loader and then a focus puller for a while. And then I was kind of shooting stuff on the side. But I don't know. It's a really tough question to ask. I think that you want to be around people that are better than you. And that's, you know, writers, directors, actors. Like if you can, filmmaking is the most accessible it's ever been in the history of filmmaking these days. I mean, when I started, it was 16 mil and I had to, you know, get short ends from commercials, or there were hard costs, you know, like even if you shot film for free and you got all your friends to do it for free, you'd have to buy the film, you'd have to pay for the processing, you'd have to pay for the telecine. Whereas now you can shoot it on a A7, put it on your laptop, and for, you know, less than $5,000, you can have something that is cinema quality as far as the, you know, the end result goes. So it's much easier, I think, to shoot stuff these days as far as getting equipment that is of a very high standard. But the content is always the most important thing, you know. Making something look nice is only part of the job of a cinematographer. You know, the story component of it is so super important. But I don't know, try and get on set, you know, assisting is a really good way to meet people and really good way to watch other people work. You know, if you work as an assistant, you can essentially treat that as your college. You know, that's like an apprenticeship. You know, you get to know the gear really well. The gear's changing all the time. You get hands-on experience to it, but you can work with a lot of other DPs, a lot of other camera writers, directors, producers, production designers, everybody across the board. You get an understanding of what everybody's role is, and you can see how everybody might attack the same situation differently.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all.
Sure. No worries.
Thank you, Miguel. I actually really like your background. Really clean, really simple.
Yeah,
Up next, you have Jeremiah, Jason, then Jackson before Lars. So Jeremiah, Jason, Jackson. We're going to knock out the J's, guys. Jeremiah, Jason, Jackson. Hey, Jeremiah, you there? Okay, let me go ahead and unmute you really quick. Here we go.
How you doing? So
hey,
quick question for you, because I've been in the industry for a long time and I've been doing DP and directing for over a decade, but I just recently acquired a film camera that's being delivered next month. And this is like an ocean that I've never, ever stepped into. And I'm very curious. I don't know anybody that really has any advice on shooting on film. And I'm really curious if you've ever shot on film and if you have any good tips for kind of jumping into a film camera itself.
Sure. I started shooting on film. So I spent a few years shooting on film. I haven't shot any for a little while, but when I was an assistant, I think I was 23 or something like that, and I bought a really beaten up secondhand old standard 16 Arriflex SR1, which was a 16mm film camera. And I made like a little 185 ground glass out of sticky tape so that I could shoot widescreen and then letterbox it later, and had a little 12 to 120mm zoom on it. And I literally got short ends off jobs. And that kind of taught me exposure, to be honest with you. I mean, the great legacy of film for me is that I still use a light meter on every job that I do. Because there are a lot of things that a light meter can tell you, rather than just where your exposure should sit for that particular shot. It's what's the base level of the room, and, you know, how bright does a practical light need to be if I want it to be bright but not too overexposed. You know, a light meter can tell you all that sort of stuff that you can do before the camera gets in position, and then you plug it in, and then you have a look and you go, oh, that's too, you know what I mean? There's a lot of work you can do. It actually makes you faster to work as well. But have you got a light meter? Have you used a light meter at all? Do you know that?
I've used them before, but usually it's when I don't have my own personal one. Usually I end up doing like a gaffer. Well, two of the gaffers that I have always have one with me.
So there's two, I guess, get to know that a little bit if you can, because there's two main methodologies of math. It just mathematically interprets light. It gives you a number to tell you how bright something is, but there's an incident amount, which is the lumisphere, which is the dome, which measures the light that's falling on it. And there's a spot meter, which measures the light reflecting off it. And those are two different levels. Yeah. So you can expose them both at the same stop, but you'll get very different results, because essentially what it's trying to do is it's trying to make whatever it is that you're looking at 18% gray, have an 18% gray value in that. But if you do a spot meter reading off a black wall, it's trying to make that black wall gray rather than black. So then you've got to think, well, it probably should be based off my, my spot meter reading is 5.6, but it should probably be a little different for that to allow for the fact that I don't want it to come out as gray. I want it to come out as black. But to be honest with you, if you just shoot stuff yourself, but don't necessarily use it straight away on a project that people are expecting perfect results from, it's probably going to help you, like rather than just throwing yourself in the deep end. But if you take spot reading, if you set a frame up, you've got color charts, you've got a bright background or a window or whatever. If you get, say, like a 200 ASA stock, and then if you write down what those exposures are in each of those different, like you take spot meter readings or incident readings, and then write them down on a piece of paper, or even take a photograph of it, and then, in Photoshop, just put what those values are. When you get that back from Telecine, then that will give you the mathematical information to be able to make a decision based on whether that was too bright or whether that was too dark. I think that would help. I'm just trying to think what I would do.
Nice, thank you. That's brilliant.
Yeah, no worries, pleasure. Good luck. What camera did you get?
The Bolex H16 reflex.
Oh yeah, the reflex, the ones you can look down the lens. Nice. Yeah. You can do really great stuff with that. The only thing about that is that it's because it's a clockwork camera, right? Sometimes the 24 frames is like 22 frames or 26 frames. So you just got to be careful about fluorescent light. Like it's very hard to sync the shutter in with fluorescent lights, which is, it's all part of a look. So, the Hertz ratings in the States will, you normally have to shoot it at 1/44 or something like that if you're in like a convenience store or something like that. But anyway, it's all fun stuff to experiment with. So good luck.
Nice. Thank you very much. We have an adapter for cinema lenses for it too, which I'm
sweet.
Yeah.
Is it Super 16 or standard?
No, it's standard 16 millimeter.
Okay, cool. I know you can get them converted. That's a sweet camera though. I did many a music video on that thing.
Mount to Canon mount adapter that you can get. So I'm
that's fun
to play with it, but I'm also nervous as hell.
You'll be good. Look, if you make a mistake, you and the Telecine operator are the only ones that'll know. Think about it like that.
That's true. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool, man. No worries. You're welcome.
Jeremiah, good to have you here for the first time, sir. Hopefully we see more of you in the future. Up next, Jason, Jackson, Linda, then Lars. Jason, you're up. Let me go ahead and unmute you really quick, Jason, if you're having trouble. How about now?
Okay. Am I?
There he is.
Here we go.
Cool. All right. So I had a quick question. Well, first of all, thank you, Armand, for doing this for us. And Lachie, thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Pleasure, man.
Cool. So I had a question. So I have shared just a lot of info about film festivals, film via social media for a long, long time. So there's something I'm curious about always whenever people are doing really, really great work, cinematography, anything in film. So I know that you've dealt with a lot of the major film festivals. You've been in that environment, but I'm also always curious about what's coming next. So just out of curiosity, like, are there, 2 or 3 film festivals or film organizations that are kind of newer that maybe people haven't heard that much about yet, but you think they're doing really great things and people should kind of pay attention to or know about?
Whoa, that's a tough one. I don't know. I so rarely get to go to them. The only ones that I've been to are Sundance and a bunch of the Australian ones. I so rarely get to go to them. Sundance is, if you get a chance, is a fantastic festival on every level to go to. From an information side of things, it's casual. It's not stuffy in suits like Cannes or anything like that. It's great. Sure. But I don't know, man. I think you got me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I should know that. Now I feel like I need, now I've let you down.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I do have a follow-up question because I wasn't sure if you'd
let's cut to that.
So let's go this one. So I've seen some of this in the chat. I'm curious about cameras. So let's say somebody's just looking at handheld, just mirrorless. So, they're not looking at red, they're not looking at RE. It's just, I want to do something that seems aesthetically sound, it seems together, but just for myself. So, handheld mirrorless, probably in the vein of, say, like a Sony, like something like that. I mean, what would you say would be a good bet in terms of, a make and model and maybe like a good lens that you absolutely should have if you're going to do that kind of work?
You could try a Sony. You could try a Canon EOS. I remember like a few years ago, I shot a lot of stuff on the 5D when it first came out with a PL mount and some stills lenses. I haven't shot on it for a while. The Blackmagic do a few good cameras as well. Depends on the sensor size you want as well, I think. And what you're going to shoot. I mean, if you're going to shoot a documentary, you should probably have something that's maybe it's got a micro four thirds or an APS-C size sensor, and it's got a zoom lens, you know, because you want a little bit more depth of field and you want the variability of that, you know. I guess it comes down to what you want, but if you want really shallow and cinematic and more portrait-like, then you go large format, you know, EOS or a Sony, and maybe some fast prime lenses, you know. Okay. But I think if you got 4 lenses, say for instance, like if I was going to shoot something on that wasn't an Alexa or something, I'd probably get maybe like a Sony A7, and I'd get the equivalent field of view of like an 18, 25, 35, and a 50, something like that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So you've got something wide, something a little bit mid-rangey. It depends on the project, I think, but it's easy to make something with a large format look cinematic because you get such a shallow depth of field. It lends itself to a much, I don't know, I think it's a little it's a little easier if you use a larger format, I think.
Very cool. I really appreciate it.
No worries, dude.
Cool. Thanks.
Good to have here, Jason. Up next we have Jackson, but Jackson's question is gonna be asked on behalf of Don. Don's gonna ask him on behalf of Jackson. So Jackson, Linda, then Lars.
Okay, hi.
Here you go.
So, first of all, Jeremiah, have fun with film, because my God, it's like the beautiful, raw, wonderful art. That's how I started, and it's the best. But Jackson is my 14-year-old stepson, Lockie, and he had a question.
Hi, Jackson. How are you, man?
Hi, so I have a question. So what's the most interesting aspect of shooting with teenagers?
What was the last part, pal? I didn't hear it.
What was the most interesting aspect of shooting with teenagers?
With teenagers.
Oh, yeah, good question. That's a very good question. I've done a lot of stuff with kids now, with teenagers and minors. The most interesting thing is you see, particularly with a show like Stranger Things, you see them grow as human beings. You see them, especially at a really important time in every boy and girl's life. And to see that transformation, and the thing I really like is the confidence that comes with working in an ensemble environment, because they're all really good friends and they're all very supportive of each other. And I think that that's really important because it makes everybody's work better. That's probably one thing that's really fun about it. Another thing is to see how many Instagram followers they get, because it's out of control. When they're that young, they might have like a couple when they're 12, and then they're 16 and they're like in the tens of millions. So that's pretty remarkable. And you think about that level of exposure as a young, you know, growing person, that's a pretty big deal. And to see the maturity that younger people tend to get to at an earlier age because of something like that is pretty interesting. But as far as working with them, one of the really tricky things is they've got a really limited time, because you know what it's like, you have to go to school. And so it's the same thing with the kids on Strange Things. You have to go to school during the day, but instead of going to your normal campus, there's a school system that's out in one of the trailers outside. And so we might be shooting something with Millie, and then we have to break her at a certain time. So we have to finish all of her work, and then we've got to turn around and do whoever she was talking to when she's off camera. So then she'll go to school. So then what we do is we often get somebody that looks like Millie, and we put their shoulder in the foreground, who's got the same hair and the same wardrobe. And we kind of pretend that she's there in the first place, but she's not. So it's a little bit of a trick, but that's probably one of the most interesting things, like from a technical side of things, of working with kids.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lachlan.
Of course. Pleasure.
Good to meet you, Jackson. We do have a few more, Lachlan, if that's okay. Up next, we have Linda, then back to Lars. Linda, you're up.
Awesome. Sorry I got here a little late. Thanks for doing this. Real quick, so as far as like with Stranger Things or any of your productions, how involved are you with the lighting and the setting and the feel for the environment? And with Stranger Things, the upside down and the real world, like how was that for you?
Good question. So the lighting is I'm ultimately responsible for it as the cinematographer, as the head of the camera department, but it's done in conjunction with a number of other people. Obviously the lighting department and the group department, both are are responsible for changing the light in a particular way, but also obviously conversations with the director. So you always go in there with, I think there should be, well, it's written as, you know, night exterior woods or something like that. So you go, so straight away that gives you an idea of what you're going to do. So you go, okay, well, we're going to need to find a location that's, you know, that looks right for what we need it to do. And then we're going to have to try and get lights in there. How many people are in there? Is it Steadicam? All that kind of stuff, it becomes like this kind of Pandora's box question. But it always goes down to the aesthetics of the scene, you know, tonally, where is it sitting? Well, for me anyway, tonally, where's it sitting, and how does that maybe influence the lighting? You know, should it be a bit more practically motivated because you're in a convenience store, or you're outside in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing that would motivate that except for the woods and a couple of flashlights? So there's that stuff that comes into it as well, I guess. But what was the last, there was another bit to that.
Oh, and then like how the feel for it, like when you're creating this, and I guess it also ties in with how are you feeling, like how are like the motivation level, the inspiration and all that, because it's definitely an art to what you're doing. Even though, you know, you have the people on the other side of the camera, there's also your instinctive intuition and creative side.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. I always go back to the story, and I always make, like, before I do shows, I always do a breakdown, which has got, you know, the scene number, the time of day, and I used to do it on smaller things. I used to do it on little pieces of paper that I'd laminate, and I wear monocles around my neck to check where the sun's going. I used to have them around my neck, so I could literally have them in front of me and I could just flick through them. But now I'm doing stuff that's so hard, and it's got so many things on it, the notes are too big for me to allow you to look like Flavor Flav if I had them around my neck. So I just have them in a book now. And it's got methodologies of how I want to shoot it, or based on conversations I've had with directors, specialized equipment, all that sort of stuff. But the main thing is just a quick one-line reference to what's before the scene and what's after the scene. So you know what you've just come from and where you're going to as well, which I think is really important. So you can think about it just as, like, particularly about how you might want to execute getting into the scene. Like the scene might be written in a way that it needs a shot that's an in to the scene, you know, rather than just a wide shot. You know, maybe there's a more creative way of doing it, or maybe you need a little bit of glue between that and what's coming after it, or there's a clever way to maybe blend the two. There's a transition there or something like that. So that's what I do now. And that, as far as like the feeling, I lean on that heavily, because that's kind of like research for me, I think. Because in the heat of battle, there's so much stuff going on. There's sun setting, and there's something's gone wrong over there, and that person's late, and you know what I mean? It's like all these other things that are just out of control. So at least there's something that amidst the myriad of madness, there's something that you've sat down in the you know, the early days of pre-production and actually considered, and it kind of can help you get away with things and be able to react to stuff.
That's so cool. One last thing. I live in Atlanta, so
oh, right on.
Your opinions of Atlanta?
How's it going over there? Is it just as a quick note? Does it feel like everybody's going to get back to work there soon, or no?
I actually just was booked for a commercial that's going to be shooting in June. So I'm a filmmaker slash actress. Okay. So but yeah, it's
oh, that's encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of the non-union stuff, and Florida already has their stipulations out, so they're starting to roll things. So it's exciting and very encouraging. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Great.
What was your feel for Atlanta?
I liked it. It's a great town. I really liked it a lot. I'd like to get back there sooner rather than later and get back to work if I can, but I don't know. Who knows?
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Myriad of Madness. I love that, Locke. Really, really cool.
Filmmaking a lot of the time.
She coined that, Myriad of Madness. We're gonna go back to Lars. Lars, you there, sir?
I am. Thank you. Lucky, I just had a quick follow-up question. I was really interested in something you said about creating an environment where people felt safe to contribute. My former career was a ship's captain, and we were always trying to do the same thing. And we found that quite difficult. Particularly, we wanted somebody, if they saw something unsafe, to feel like they could break the chain of command and speak to somebody in a different department. And I would imagine it would be quite difficult on a ship as well. I was wondering if you could speak to, I mean, on a set as well, how you could get to that point where somebody, you know, in a different department might say, hey, wait a minute, maybe that's not safe, or, you know, this might be a more efficient way to do that. How do you go about creating that?
I think it comes from the top, to be honest with you. I think it comes from the heads of department and the attitude that they create in that work environment. And I've always been I used to, as an assistant, you know, and not so much when I started, maybe when I first started shooting, but as an assistant, I used to work for like tyrannical asshole directors or horrible producers, you know, and nobody wants to live like that. I definitely don't want to work like that. And everybody was on eggshells and so nervous about saying the wrong thing that they just keep their mouth shut, regardless of whether or not it might be a good idea. And so I just don't want to be like that. And I just think that you get the best work out of people when they feel like they can contribute without getting in trouble, because good ideas come from everywhere. So I think that you don't necessarily actually, I was going to say you don't necessarily have to say that, but I make a point of saying that to my heads of department when I hire them. It's one of the first things that I say on the first call is that I want you to contribute because you're a creative person. And I don't have the answers to everything. I've got an idea. I might not necessarily know the best way to execute it. Maybe I've got a better idea for this thing, but for when we, 2 days when we're shooting that, scene on the water or the scene on top of the building, I don't know. So I'm going to need to lean on you a little bit. So you tell me your best version of how we would go about doing that. So I think that it's an attitude as much as it is empowering people to feel like they will not be persecuted.
Okay, so if you're working as DP, do you still feel like you can say that to the other departments? Like, hey, I welcome ideas from your guys. Or
I say that to the art department. I say that to makeup. Like if we're doing a night scene and there's a character that needs to be really sweaty, but I know that there's a kind of light that I'm going to put up that will be quite reflective if they make their face too wet. So I'm like, well, what's another way that we could go about doing that? Because I don't know what that is. I don't know how to solve this with the tools that I've got here. So is there something that you might have experienced or you could do that might help this out? So there's an opportunity for that. I guess that makes sense, I think.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. Thanks for taking the time. It sounds like a great set to be in,
Jokes help. Never be afraid of a joke.
Thank you, Lars. I believe we came full circle. So my fan question to you, Lachlan, is super simple, and I'm sure you get it a lot. What has been your most fulfilling scene to shoot on Stranger Things?
Most fulfilling scene.
Something that made you go, oh, shoot, I actually pulled it off. Like, this is a cool shot. I pulled it off.
What was that? That's a good question, because it felt like it happened all the time, because there were so many difficult things in that show. Like you read it and you go, I remember there was some conversations the boys and I would have, the Duffers and I would have on the weekend, and we'd be shot listing this thing. We'd be like, fuck, I don't know how we're going to do that. And then eventually you work it out. And, but to the point, you go and talk to your other heads of department, but there was, you know what? And it didn't actually make it into the cut. There was one, we got a 75-foot telescoping crane, which is an enormous thing. It comes on tank tracks. There was one night that we shot at the fairgrounds where we had a 75-foot crane and two 50-foot technos and 2 units and 8 there was just shit everywhere. Like you couldn't point a camera without seeing a bunch of gear. But there was one shot we did there, which was they cut into it and they used the very top of it, which is we did a 75-foot techno crane shot where we measured out the distance on the Ferris wheel, where we saw, I think it was it the Wheelers? I think you saw the Wheelers getting onto, no, you saw, it was Mrs. Wheeler, and Ted and Holly, is it Holly, the girl, getting on there. And we did a shot where you'd hand off from the carny and we tracked them all the way to the very top of a 60-foot Ferris wheel with them doing dialogue the entire time. The shot was too long. It was never going to make it work in the show. But I remember looking at, there was 6 grips with 3 ladders and this really intricate pulley system working at the limits of the inertia of this machine at 3 o'clock in the morning when it was getting freezing cold because it was November in Atlanta and we were shooting for the 4th of July and everybody's supposed to be hot because it's summer and they're in shorts and stuff. And it was just, that was one of those things where we were right on the edge of being able to pull it off, and we pulled it off and then it didn't make the cut.
No,
but we know we did it.
Is it gonna be shown anywhere? Is it gonna be on some type of reel after?
I don't know. I'd love to see it again, but it's really one of those you had to be there kind of moments because it was so ridiculous and it took so many people so much thought and consideration, and it was like a real kind of holy shit. we actually pulled that off moment that nobody, like it would be, people that would understand filmmaking would look at the shot and go, I'm not quite sure how they did that. But nobody will ever know that or see it.
Oh no. Lachlan, it's been such a pleasure with you. You've been here for almost 90 minutes, so I appreciate you so much for being here.
That's all right.
Before we go, we'd love to know if you have any social media pages you'd like to share. I know you mentioned Instagram earlier. Are you okay with sharing it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's not really work stuff. It's mostly just personal work, stuff that I find interesting. But yeah, by all means, it's just my name. I know my name.
Cool.
Yeah.
And one last thing, because we are currently quarantined, no one, like a lot of us aren't working right now. So is there something, I like to ask this to all our speakers, is there something that you, like I guess, inspiring message you'd like to give all of us before you go?
Inspiring message.
I know I had to put you on the spot, but.
No, it's fine. I feel like it's been quite cathartic for me, this experience, to be honest with you. I love the fact that I've been told, it's like, you know, the cosmos has gone, everybody just needs to stop and everybody just sit down and think about things for a little bit. And I'm going to give you the time to do that. And I think that it's been really important for me on a personal level, but I'm sure everybody's doing it. It's just reevaluating. It's like, what is important to you? There is going to be, especially from a filmmaking side of things, there is going to be a ton of work coming out at the end of this because everybody is going to be desperate for stuff. Stuff hasn't been made for this long since filmmaking began, I think. So it's very exciting. There's great opportunities for everybody. I don't know, clarity. If there's one thing you can take out of it, it's clarity, whatever it is you want to do, whatever is important to you. I think it's a great opportunity to reevaluate that.